HOA tried to tow my legally permitted vehicle twice in one day. Posted by Desert Nurse 760. I paid cash for a 2-bedroom condo in April. The condo came with 2 parking permits, one red and one green. The updated rules that were sent to me after closing states that an owner gets 2 parking permits, one for covered parking and one for uncovered parking. However, the rules do not state which permit is for which parking. Walking around the neighborhood revealed that both green and red permits under covered parking, as well as about half of the vehicles showing no permit at all. 1 week ago, I received a notice on my windshield that my car would be towed for not showing the proper permit, even though the permit was clearly visible in the corner of the passenger side windshield. Yeah, in fact, the notice was placed under the passenger wiper blade directly above the permit. I called the management company and I informed them of their mistake, along with a picture of the permit in the corner of the windshield. I thought that this would solve the problem, and I was wrong. I am a nurse and I work the night shift. At about 1300 hours, my wife came in screaming that one of her cars was being towed. I immediately got up, I got dressed, and I went outside to find an employee of the management company directing a tow truck to tow my car. She said that it was being towed because it had the wrong color permit. I immediately pulled up the R&Rs on my phone and I asked her to show me where the color codes were explained. She couldn't do that because that explanation doesn't exist in the rules. But she refused to stop the towing company, so I had no choice but to call the police. Upon arrival, I explained to the officers what was happening, and then I showed them the R&Rs on my phone and both of my cars with the proper permits. They told the management employee and the tow company that they had no reason to tow my car. The rep hemmed and hawed that I was parked wrong even if the rules didn't state so. The cop ordered that tow company to release my car. Problem solved, right? Yeah, wrong. I go back to bed and I just fall asleep when my wife comes in screaming that they're towing the car again. I go back outside and the same cop is there from earlier. This time, the president of the management company, which is the one who oversees the HOA board meetings, he's there too, along with the same tow truck driver and employee from before. This time, my car is already up on the flatbed. The manager told police that I still had the wrong permit to use covered parking, even though it was the right one according to this unwritten rule that I'd learned of earlier in the day. The cop asked the manager if she had inspected the permit before calling for the car to be towed, and she admitted, well, that she hadn't, and she was just going off of what the employee had told her from earlier. The cop asked her to verify that the permit was the right color to be under covered parking, and she hesitatingly admitted that it was. The cop was visibly perturbed and again ordered the tow truck to release my vehicle. He then gave a stern talking to the manager about making false claims and not verifying for herself what her employee told her. The cop gave me a case number and said that both reports would be available in 24 hours. I plan to use those reports to bring this to the attention of the HOA board, as I know for certain that the manager will try to sweep this under the rug or will refuse to even acknowledge this incident. What should my next step be? First update. I was finally able to get to the police station for the 2 police reports from that day. Report number 1 at 14:02. Management believes he does not have proper parking permit, but per RP he does. Civil issue between the RP, reporting person, and the management and HOA board over parking. The property has parking guidelines which are unclear of what vehicle could park where. The reporting person has been having issues with one specific board member who states that he harasses him. The reporting person was advised that he could obtain a civil harassment order, and reporting person's vehicle was not towed. Report number 2 at 1800 says, the subject has credentials to park where he was told not to park. HOA did not verify before calling tow. They have been counseled. Truck had proper parking pass, and the HOA manager did not verify before calling a tow. They have been told they must verify prior to calling a tow, or else they could face civil issues. I think this pretty much shows how wrong the HOA management was. I am talking to an attorney about my best legal options. I will update here as things move forward. An edit. I received word from the HOA management company that I would not be allowed to attend the online meeting tomorrow because it is only for the listed owner, who happens to be my wife. And I have a full, legal, valid, and notarized power of attorney that gives me exclusive rights to discuss the property with the HOA board and HOA management. I shot back a nasty email telling the management company to go back to law school. There was an attempt to bar me from the meeting 2 days before it was scheduled. For reasons that I won't go into now, the condo is held in a trust with my son as a beneficiary, which means, from a legal standpoint, he is the holder of the deed. The HOA management company tried to argue that only deed-holding owners can participate in violation hearings. This, despite me having a fully encompassing power of attorney for my son that explicitly gives me the power to manage all real estate holdings. In the end, my son sent an email to the HOA management designating me as his representative in the matter, and they were forced to accept it. However, the meeting was postponed until August 3rd. OP then says I was banned from r/HOA for my previous post. Apparently, they don't take too kindly to people exposing the HOA's screw-ups. From the first viewing to the close of escrow, I have always been the POC. The POA specific to this property has been on file with A, the escrow company, and B, the BIA, the condo is leased on Indian land, and C, my financial institution, and also D, the HOA management company, which is the one causing these problems, and E, the home insurance company. The HOA management company did not even know any of my son's contact info prior to the 24th, as they have never had any reason to interact with him due to the POA. This was a ploy to prevent me from representing myself at the hearing, but it backfired on them. The next update says, if you've been following this saga, you'd know that the HOA had originally scheduled my parking violation hearing for Monday, July 28th, and then they moved it to Tuesday, August 3rd, which is tomorrow. I just received an email stating that they have again rescheduled it for August 17th. I am fairly certain that they did this to conform to California's open meetings law that states that HOAs must announce all meetings ahead of time to all HOA members. They failed to do that for the first 2 scheduled meetings, and apparently someone got wise to their screw-up. I'll keep you posted on the 17th. Today I received a letter from the HOA management that I have violated CC&R and R&R regulations by posting my open letter to HOA members on the HOA bulletin board that's located at the front of the complex next to the mailboxes. I had posted the letter that I had sent to the HOA board regarding the intentional harassment by the board regarding my properly permitted vehicle being intentionally towed on July 7th. I went through both the R&Rs and the CC&Rs and could find no mention of HOA members posting on the HOA bulletin board being illegal. Interestingly, the letter states my violation as posting letter illegally on HOA info boards. I'm no lawyer, but illegally generally means that there is some state or local law prohibiting an act. HOA rules aren't local, state, or federal law, so I don't know why they're using the term illegally. Yeah, no worries, I just laughed it off. My wife and I have decided to go ahead with filing suit against the HOA. We have retained an experienced law firm that only represents homeowners in HOA disputes, and I'll update you as things move forward. It's been a long 2 days. First off, while this parking drama has been unfolding, there is a second issue that I have been dealing with. That is an HOA board member ambushing and harassing me in the parking lot when I leave for work at night. This has happened twice in the 5 months that we have lived here. This is the board member who has placed security cameras at various places around the building, including one that he had pointed at the pool area, apparently recording people at the pool, including children. As a result, I had determined that my best course of action, after filing a complaint with the HOA board twice, which was ignored both times, was to request a restraining order against this individual. A temporary restraining order was denied by the court, and a hearing was scheduled for today, August 18th, to consider the regular restraining order. I arrived at court only to be told that the hearing was rescheduled for September 1st. Important to note is that I received no notice of the date change as is required by law. Upon arriving back home, I was greeted by an email from a high-priced HOA law firm out of Los Angeles. The letter basically states that they are representing the board member and that my RO request has no merit because he was acting within his duties as an HOA board member. What the letter failed to mention was that the first instance of harassment took place before he was seated on the board. The letter goes on about frivolous lawsuits, having to pay the board members' legal fees, blah blah blah. It's a bullcrap letter designed to scare me off of pursuing the RO. One thing of note in the letter is its attempt to conflate my RO request with my continuous parking violations. This board member is the same one who has 2 parking passes that allow him to park both of his cars under the carport. Us regular peons, we only get 1. At the hearing, I logged on through Zoom to find only the HOA management representative with her camera on. The other 4 board members, including the one I have the RO restraining order pending against, were all blacked out. The HOA rep insisted that it was I that requested the meeting and therefore there would be no questions. I would state my case and the board would decide in executive session what my fate would be. I argued that it wasn't me who requested the meeting, it was the board that sent the violation notice to me. Anyway, I made my case the best that I could by pointing out that no new owners were told what the permit was for what parking. I then pointed out that a letter was sent in February with the details of the parking permits, but that I never received that letter when I closed escrow in April. And that letter explicitly states that the permits are non-transferable and registered to the individual units and owners. So the board member with 2 red permits is in violation of the HOA R&Rs. My pleas fell on deaf ears. So now I wait to hear my fate. My wife, who has been supportive, has had enough. She's ready to sell and get the heck out of this nightmare. She went so far as to arrange our realtor to meet with us this Saturday. The good news is that prices have increased roughly 15 to 20% in just 5 months, so if we sell, we will just break even considering our closing cost. Something that I have not mentioned up to now is my ongoing attempt at engaging as many other homeowners as I can in the workings of the HOA and the management company. To that end, I set up a Zoom call and I spread the word. The call was this afternoon and 15 homeowners logged on. All of them related stories from heck concerning the management company and its principal agent who is the de facto head of the HOA, and all agreed that the management company needs to be replaced. One of the homeowners is an active member of the HOA board but is resigning next week. He indicated that 2 other board members are either resigning or moving, so there will be 3 empty seats on the board. Of the 15 on the call, 3 agreed to be nominated to fill those empty slots. It's a start towards cleaning up the HOA board and replacing the management company with a competent one. Lots of you have messaged me asking for an update. Since my last post, the number of disgruntled homeowners who are unhappy with the HOA board and the management company has grown to 46 out of 120 units, a fairly sizable chunk. We have been having weekly Zoom meetings to strategize our responses to the monthly HOA meeting, which happened on 9/22. We had sent a letter to the board prior to the meeting indicating that we had 3 homeowners who were willing to be appointed to the board for the remainder of the term, which expires in February. As I posted earlier, there are 2 board vacancies and another board member, which is the one who has been harassing me, is in escrow and should be closing this week. Our grievances were simple. We are unanimous that the management company should not be in control of the HOA board. The board should control the management company. Many owners expressed dissatisfaction with the parking rules and the fact that the HOA never clearly defined them. Virtually all of us expressed the opinion that the management company should be terminated for a whole host of reasons. At the start of the meeting, the management, which is, really just one person, muted everyone and refused to let anyone talk until after the board appointed 2 of their own people to the vacancies. No discussion was allowed. No questions to the new board members were allowed. Our candidates were not even considered, and the entire board refused to be on camera. Further, the manager would not allow any questions. We could only make statements that were less than 3 minutes long. In her opening, she mentioned a $7,000 legal bill that she stated that the board had incurred defending a board member from an angry homeowner, and yeah, that would be me. She then opened the floor, but would only unmute one person at a time. Person after person expressed their displeasure that 2 new board members were appointed without any discussion or input from the homeowners. Many asked why the board member who was in escrow did not resign from the board and allow at least one of our candidates to be appointed. Again, neither the board nor the management answered any questions. Yeah, there was talk about a recall, which most of my coalition supported. One member, who is not part of our group, asked about that $7,000 legal expense, but the board, again, refused to answer. When it became my turn, I explained the best that I could in 3 minutes why the HOA paid an attorney 7 Gs and how I had been continually harassed by the board and the management. The next few speakers demanded that the HOA and management immediately cease payment to the attorney and asked why the members were not informed of the board's decision to hire one. Out of nearly 50 speakers, only one owner expressed approval of the board and the management company. After the meeting, I received a message for a 65-year-old female owner who forwarded me the harassment that she had endured by the same board member that has been harassing me. I was astounded by how similar our stories were. Her niece had been living with her and found this pervert filming her from his kitchen window, which overlooks the pool area. Same thing happened to my wife, which, along with the other harassment, was why I filed the restraining order. However, in hindsight, I made a very bad decision. When I discovered that his condo was in escrow, I withdrew the restraining order, thinking that he would soon be gone. After discovering this, I immediately sent the board a letter asking why someone who has a documented history of harassment was allowed to be appointed to the board in the first place. I received no answer. My group will meet on Zoom on Sunday to discuss what our next moves should be, and I welcome your input. It's been about a month since I last posted, so here's a quick update. After the previous HOA meeting on 9/22, every homeowner received a letter stating that the board was levying a one-time $185 assessment fee to cover legal fees of $10,000 incurred by the board to defend the, now no longer, board member from my restraining order lawsuit and to cover the recall election that was called for, but then rescinded by my group. It was pointed out by one of us, who happens to be a lawyer, that every HOA board member must be covered under a director's and officer's liability insurance policy. The question was asked why the board did not file a claim on this policy before levying the assessment fee, and why we were being charged for an election recall that never happened. To date, the board has not responded to either question. On the legal front, I attended court on 9/1 to formally withdraw my restraining order complaint on the board member who had been harassing me. I did it because the MLS listed his condo as in escrow, and I figured I wouldn't need a restraining order if he was moving out. The attorney hired by the HOA was there, and the judge asked him if he agreed with the dismissal. He answered that he did. Case closed, or so I thought. A week later, I get a certified letter that they are suing me for attorney fees and cost. At the time, the bill was just under $10,000. The letter claimed that because I withdrew my complaint, the board member was the prevailing party and was entitled to recover attorney fees, and listed a number of court cases in his defense. A quick Google search revealed that all of those cases involved contract law, not civil restraining order cases. So I typed up my response and then I filed it with the court. The hearing to determine if I owed them $10,000 was on October 21st. It took the judge less than 3 minutes to tear their argument to shreds and dismiss their case. Ergo, I'm not paying a dime to the board member or the HOA who hired the attorney. Keep in mind that this board member had resigned on 9/24 when his condo sold, and the HOA attorney was still being paid to defend him. He didn't even come to court as he has moved out of the state completely. On 10/27, there was another monthly HOA meeting. Again, the board allowed no Q&A, just 3 minutes per person. About 30 owners showed up. The day before, the HOA sent out a blast email to owners telling them that the legal fees had increased to $12,000 because of a resident who continues to cause trouble with the board, and that the $185 assessment was to cover that, while they acknowledged that the recall effort was off the table. During my 3 minutes, I explained in bullet points the lawsuit and that the HOA's case against me to collect attorney fees was denied and dismissed by the court. Others asked why the homeowners had to foot the bill for a civil issue not involving the HOA. Again, the board refused to answer any questions and told everyone that they could email their questions to the board. What a frickin' cop-out! I mean, I understand that there has been considerable pressure mounting on the HOA to explain why the D&O insurance wasn't utilized to pay the legal fees. I surmise that the board knows that any investigation into the history of the offending board member would reveal that he had been accused of harassing other owners numerous times before he was seated on the board, and that would preclude him from being covered by the insurance policy. This is an evolving part of the story. On the parking issue, I discovered that the woman who signed the authorization to tow my wife's car is not an HOA employee or a board member, nor is she employed by the management company. As far as we can tell, she is simply a friend of the manager. California law requires that the person authorizing a tow do so in an official capacity as a manager, board member, or employee of the HOA. Bringing this to the attention of the HOA and the management company has got me nothing but silence. I am considering pursuing this in small claims court, as there is another owner whose car was towed that day who was also never provided with the parking rules when they purchased their condo. They are definitely suing the HOA in small claims to recoup the towing fees of nearly $400. That's it in a nutshell, nothing earth-shattering. I was relieved that the judge found in my favor in the lawsuit, and I know that a number of owners are demanding answers from the HOA board. My group is setting our sights on the HOA board election coming up in February. There is nothing the board can do to stop that from happening. Update in the comments. Commenter says, sounds illegal to me to have an HOA foot the bill regarding a civil matter. That guy should have to pay his own legal fees, but I'm not a lawyer. Plus, why is the HOA lawyer still representing him after he sold his unit and isn't on the board anymore? Seriously, that's messed up. OP replies, those are the exact questions that are being asked of the board. They remain silent to all inquiries. Another commenter asked, I want to know who actually hired the lawyer and who is going to end up with the bill when these schmucks get booted off the board and the new board tells the lawyer to pound sand. And OP answers, according to the first letter I received from the attorney, the HOA through the management company hired him. However, nothing in the last 3 months' budget indicates that he has been paid, which is strange. This is a high-dollar LA legal firm. I know for a fact that they don't work on contingency. So somebody paid them, we just don't know who or how it was done. A very long, twisted tale with multiple updates and a deeply evil HOA. OP sold a parcel of family land to a developer who built a neighborhood. There's now an HOA and they're aggressively trying to take the rest of OP's land. So, long story short, today has been an absolute crap show. I can't even comprehend where to start. So my parents owned about 30 acres of land in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, on the outskirts of town. My parents built their house in the late 80s, and that's where I've lived my whole life. My parents passed away, and I inherited the property, and it's all my land, or was my land. Back in 2005, this developer bought up a bunch of neighboring land and wanted to buy my land. I told him I was willing to sell 10 acres furthest from the house, which is the adjoining section to his neighborhood. He asked for 20 acres, and I told him that the second 10 acres would be 3 times the price, and he agreed. And we signed the paperwork, and he bought the land, and I was paid for it. End of story, or so I thought. The land sat empty for over a decade, since it took a while for him to sell the plots of land that he made to homebuyers, and his company built houses. From about 2005 to 2012, the land sat empty, and I didn't mind. I still mowed the grass and whatnot to keep it tidy, but I never tried to take the land over or anything. By fall of last year, he had finished the entire area, and there's about 200 homes in that neighborhood. Because of the neighborhood, my 10 acres is now worth about 10 to 20 times what it was originally worth, and the HOA knows that. Since September of 2017, I've had a bunch of angry letters and citations left on my property and in my mailbox. Some of them include having a barn larger than 7 by 7 feet. I actually have a 20 by 40 barn. They said having abandoned vehicles on my property, and it's a project car shell that I'm working on. I have the actual chassis in the barn, but it needs quite a bit of work. I bought an old rusted body and it sits outside and will continue to do so until I can deal with it. Having a non-conforming mailbox, which I still have no idea what the heck this is. Having improper roof tiles, again, no idea. I ignored them and I told the HOA members that I'm not part of their neighborhood and therefore have no reason to follow their bullcrap rules. The HOA says since my property values have gone up, I owe back dues from the date I sold my land, before there was even a single house built, and have to correct everything on the list. The back dues are currently $10,200, but they state that if I don't pay by December 31st, 2017, I'll be charged interest that accrued. Again, no idea where they are getting the interest from, but I do believe their HOA fees are around $750 a year. It'll cost me about $15,000 to $20,000 to fix my house. I think it's absolute bullcrap that they can even make me try to do so. First, I went through all the documents I signed and not a single document from the developer makes any mention of an HOA or my association with it. I have no idea why the HOA is coming after me. I live almost half a mile away from the nearest house that belongs to the neighborhood. The entire neighborhood has its own little custom street signs and lamps. I don't have any of that, so how can they say I'm part of the HOA? They said to either pay up or they will put a lien on my property and take it over. From what I understand, if I pay the $10,000, doesn't that mean I'm admitting to guilt and being forced into the HOA? Update. So I just had an hour-long discussion with the lawyer and he went through all the documents. He asked if I was sure that that was every document and I told him that it was. And it was. When I sold all the documents, I put them all in the same folder along with my taxes. He says that there is no chance I'm in the HOA since I didn't sign anything. He let me know that he'd be glad to send them a cease and desist letter to the HOA. I brought up adverse possession and he suggested that I don't pursue it since I want them to leave me alone rather than to instigate anything bigger. So for now, he said to not pay anyone or sign anything. He'll mail out the C&D letter today and he says that if the HOA tries contacting me, I should just tell them to contact him instead. So I think I'm in the clear for now. New update. So I met with the real estate attorney that was referred to me by a Redditor on here, and I did the title search, and I'm in the process of trying to find the old developer's master plans. So far, here's what's been dug up. I sold my land to developer A. He owned the land for about 2 years and then filed bankruptcy and lost the land to the bank. That's when the maintenance of the land went to crap and I was mowing it and taking care of it because the bank didn't care. Bank sold it to developer B, and that is the person that built the current neighborhood. We got in touch with developer B and he said he was no longer part of the neighborhood and, in fact, the HOA is in charge of the entire area. His company just owned the lots and they sold and built on them for the families and they have zero say anymore. I asked him about the master plans and if he thought he owned my remaining 10 acres and he said, absolutely not. The entire neighborhood sits on old land plus the 20 acres that were purchased from me. So he was helpful and it was clear he had no wrongdoing. I spoke to the lawyer to see if we could file an adverse possession on the land that I maintained, but he said it would be a waste of time and money, but I was just going to do it to spite the HOA. The title search and everything came up clean. It showed my parents as the previous owners and then me, so no way they could have owned my land. The records go way back, and there is a clear chain of ownership, as my lawyer put it, and it's incontestable. We sent the HOA a cease and desist letter as well as to stop contacting me unless they have actual signed documents that show I was part of the HOA. They never got back to me. I was out of town and came back last night to my mailbox missing. It was cut clear off of the post with a chainsaw, which was a wooden post with a metal mailbox on top. I told my lawyer this, and he says that that is a big deal and that USPS would send the person to jail. I repurchased an identical mailbox and I set up cameras all over the property. If they try it again, I'll have them on tape. But the biggest thing we uncovered was that we found out what they are planning. Turns out the HOA wants to put in another community playground and a pool and clubhouse, and they need land. They can't expand in any other direction since they're almost on the end of a highway on one side and the other sides are zoned for agriculture. They decided they'd try to take over my land. They have yet to also file a lien on my property, so I'm guessing they were trying to force me into the HOA to make them sell my land below market value. Either way, they showed their hand and now I'm on alert. We filed a complaint with the police regarding the stolen mailbox and we have a paper trail for that now. It's just a waiting game to see what they do next, I guess. Should I send them a letter saying that I know their plan and there is no way they can get my land? They have their monthly meeting every second Tuesday of the month, so it's in a few days and I'm sure it'll be the topic of discussion. Should I go do it? New update. So I was away for the holidays and I came back on Monday to find my project car was towed out of my driveway. My pond was emptied out and filled with gravel and sand, and it fenced off 2 acres, 2 chains by 1 furlong, of my property closest to the HOA. I immediately called the police and filed a report regarding the stolen property. The car wasn't registered and was just an empty shell, so I have no idea where it is, nor will it be easy to track. It's not worth a lot, maybe like $2,500, but it's a principle of that jerk president of the HOA. I had my lawyer draft up the C&D and sent it nearly 2 weeks ago, and they haven't contacted me in any way except this. I hired a local salvage company to come and tear up the fence this weekend, and they are doing it free of charge since I'm letting them keep the fence to sell as scrap metal or whatever they do with it. My lawyer suggested that I send up a letter demanding payment to fix my pond as it was filled in with gravel and sand. The local landscape company quoted me nearly $8,000 to get the pond back to the way it was, so that is what he suggested that I ask. Oh, and another $2,000 for the loss of use of the pond. The HOA has lawyered up, so I think it's best I no longer post anything on here until it's settled. I don't want to leave you all without some closure since you've been an amazing help. Final update. So, after 6 long months, everything has been resolved. This is my final post regarding this, and I already asked my lawyer if I could post this, and he said, go ahead. So the HOA board got a lawyer to respond to my C&D, and they requested a meeting ASAP with my lawyer present as well. I didn't want to go, but my lawyer suggested me hearing them out at least. At the meeting, I noticed there was the president and some of the higher-ups were not there. The board had no idea what the heck was happening, and their lawyer was just as confused as them. After I laid out my timeline of events, they thanked me for my time, accepted all the financial burden of replenishing my pond, my missing car, they couldn't locate it, and damages. I got checks for everything and got my pond restored back in April and didn't really think much of it. I found out a few weeks ago from the new HOA president. Turns out the old president, treasurer, and someone else had been stealing money from the coffers. They wanted my land to expand and put in a pool, a clubhouse, and so on, just as I saw on their website. The old board fined everyone a ton of money to get all the cash together and to buy my land. Instead, they spent it on themselves. They needed my land somehow, so they thought they could just take over the land that I wasn't using. Long story short, their entire plan fell apart after I fought back and brought to the other members of the HOA's attention what they were doing. From what I've been told, they had to sell their house to pay back the HOA and have since moved away. The HOA has offered me market value for my land, and I do plan on selling it since I don't really use the land for anything and the money isn't bad. I did not file any complaints with the postal inspector or anything since the situation resolved itself. I got a new project car, and for those asking, it was a 98 Supra with a bad engine. My new project is a 67 Fastback that I plan on restoring to look like Eleanor. How would you handle these worst HOA neighbors ever? This post is by Sensitive Ad 1896. I lived in the same HOA off and on in my 20s and early 30s. There were 3 or 4 streets and probably no more than about 60 houses in the development. It was a 0 lot line community, and, of course, the very worst of the worst HOA jerks live right next door. I received handwritten complaints inside my mailbox, illegal by the way, on multiple occasions. The ones I remember were about trash cans left out for too long. I was in major depressive states on those occasions, and essentially in order to keep my dog quiet, inside my own house, when I wasn't even there. They would invite themselves over to my front yard to ambush me while outside with, "Your garage door doesn't need to be up right now," or "Your front shrubs need to be trimmed. This oleander should never have been planted here." On so many of these occasions, I wanted to tell this jerk where he could stick it, but he was a good 30 years older and so ridiculously entitled. I didn't have the guts, and it probably wasn't worth it. At some point, my close family member directly across the street started yelling at them as soon as they stepped foot off the road and onto the front of her property. When I left for a few years, the house sat empty while the homeowner, my family member, was in a nursing home, and then moved back. Things had escalated. Before I had left, these jerks had routinely parked a minivan in their driveway. Then their live-in, 30-something-year-old adult son got a new car and wanted it more protected, so he made some kind of deal with a woman down the street to use her garage since she didn't need the second parking spot. Fine, cool, I don't care. What I did care about was when they started complaining about cars in my driveway. This wasn't something that I did regularly, but my very close friends ended up in a legitimately unsafe situation where they lived, and they came to stay with me while they figured out how to get out of their lease and move. The HOA jerk next door neighbors lost it. They tried to throw the bylaw book at me for having cars stored in the driveway. The cars were being used daily, and lots of other people parked in their own driveways consistently. At this point, I went through the bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. As it turned out, there was a rule explicitly barring one homeowner from using the garage of another homeowner. Why? I don't know or care. Of course, that was a rule that didn't need to be followed, but our driveway had to be clear, shrubs trimmed to their liking, and trash cans brought in before the garbage truck was off the street. There were a couple short cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood that ran right up to a ravine, so there was no house at the end of these streets. Apparently, these jerks didn't like that a homeowner parked his work-supplied and branded truck on the street at the end of his cul-de-sac. Their first call to complain wasn't to him, wasn't to the HOA, it was to his employer that supplied the truck. These people were ruthless and garbage humans. These are the same neighbors that complained that I didn't pick up my dog's poo in my own front yard. We didn't have any backyards at all, and almost no one had grass in their small side courtyards. They were upset that my 10-pound dog, who runs straight out to pee and straight back, wasn't on a leash because their dog was aggressive and pulling out at the same time. Because clearly, my dog being on a leash would totally fix that. Once we got a third car and parked it routinely in the driveway, they all completely lost their minds, knocking at all hours to complain while I worked enterprise cells at home, literally peeking over their courtyard wall into my kitchen, making nasty comments to my boss about me, who they went to church with, and calling my parents and other family to complain about me. These same people caused other residents to walk a certain route to avoid going past the jerk's house. It was a quiet neighborhood, so anytime someone had a party, there was a noise complaint and lots of spying on what exactly was occurring, followed by more complaints more often than not. They convinced the HOA that we shouldn't be allowed to attend HOA meetings or use the pool because our names weren't on the deed. This even though we paid all the bills, the taxes, and the HOA fees directly. Eventually, they let me in the meetings, but tried to tell me that I couldn't speak. That didn't last long. And then they tried to not allow me to vote until my father showed up to a meeting to remind them that he owned 2 properties in the neighborhood by proxy and power of attorney. My final straws were when they had their roof replaced and their roofers entered my courtyard unannounced, seeing me partially clothed in my own kitchen and then trampling my landscaping every day for a week. After that one, I was throwing roofing nails back over their wall and onto their driveway for months. They officially complained to the HOA about a small tree that wasn't trimmed to their liking, so I brought up their son's car in the neighbor's garage, and the woman who owned the said garage ended up throwing a tantrum completely with fake tears in my living room because apparently he was paying her and she needed that income. However, it was particularly satisfying when my partner told the next-door neighbor that he didn't like the highly pruned style of their front yard and preferred our slightly more wild look. I swear, that man turned as bright red as a fire truck. almost as red as when we pointed out that the neighborhood really wasn't that nice due to the enormous metal electric towers running down the middle of our street. There were islands in the road to accommodate these huge things that you could hear buzzing even from inside 24/7. About 6 months before we bought our house and got the heck out of there, I was walking my dog on a leash and she peed in another neighbor's yard on the way by. We turned to continue and I heard a voice say, "Clean up after the dog." Well, I turned around and there was no one there. This woman was yelling at me through her doorbell about non-existent dog poop. I am not proud to say that I saw red and proceeded to read her the riot act into her doorbell and pressing it repeatedly, telling her to come out. She never said another thing, never came out, and I never did see the woman ever. I never did bring up that my awful neighbors had at least 2 businesses running out of their house, strictly forbade in the bylaws, literally broke into the irrigation system controls to water their yard more on the HOA's dime, or that they had a visible water spigot and hose in their front yard. It just wasn't worth it. Perhaps this was more of a post about bad neighbors, but I will never, ever, as long as I live, own or live in an HOA again. My family is fully out of there now, and no one has anything nice to say about the place. Do you agree with these commenters? On "In order to keep the dog quiet inside the own house," commenter says, "I didn't need to read past this. How dare someone expect peace in their own home?" OP says, "You come to my door and tell me that a 10-pound dog behind the brick walls of my house is disturbing you from inside your bricked house, and I'm gonna laugh while I slam the door in your face." Comment says, "Can we not compare everyone we don't like to that group? That's super messed up and insensitive. Frankly, you both sound insufferable." What'd you think of this story? "Harass me and mine, go to jail," posted by Runner1. Many years ago, I bought a house in a neighborhood with a very restrictive HOA. However, the property I bought pre-existed the HOA and was not included in the HOA or restricted in any way. One of my neighbors seemed to take great offense at the fact that I was not part of the HOA and did not have to abide by the overly restrictive rules. From the time that I moved into the house, he started giving me grief. First, it was the HOA notices that I was under no obligation to follow. When that failed, he began to harass me at every opportunity. 4 months on end, this guy would call in noise complaints anytime I had guests over. No party, just guests. He also habitually called in code complaints and generally harassed me and my family in many other ways. 4 months, he made my life heck. Finally, one night while friends were visiting, we get a knock at the door. It was a police officer responding to another noise complaint. What? We were just sitting around playing cards. This was the last straw. I decided to get him back, and I formulated a plan. First, you must understand that this was about 30 years ago. There were no cell phones in general use, and the average citizen did not have access to the easy communications that we enjoy today, or my plan would have never worked. I've been into radio my whole life, so my car and my house were well equipped with 2-way radios. Next, it was fortuitous that my house was in a development that had only one road in or out. Also, there was a convenience store on the corner that always had plenty of cars in the lot for me to blend in with. We put our plan into action on a Friday night. We established an alibi with a close friend in town who would swear that we were at his house playing cards all night. Next, I opened the windows and placed my speakers for my sound system up in the windows facing my neighbor's house. We then cleared a hiding place in a closet with a clear view of the driveway. I then got in my car and drove to the store parking lot and found a spot that gave me a clear view of all cars entering or leaving the development. Once we established that communications were good, it was D hour. My wife turned on the stereo to rock music at full volume, rattling the neighborhood. Also, every light in the house went on. The music was so loud I could hear it at the store over half a mile away. We waited. And sure enough, in about 30 minutes, a police car turned into the development and I radioed my wife. Working together, she and her sister quickly turned off the stereo, pulled the speakers from and closed the windows, turned off all the lights, and then quickly hid in the closet. The police arrived, pulled in the driveway, and found an apparently empty and dark house. Windows closed, doors locked, curtains open, lights off, and driveway empty. My wife and her sister, they sat silently in the closet while the officers knocked on doors, shined flashlights in windows, and walked completely around the house. Eventually, they decided the house was empty and left. I watched them exit the development and head back towards town. We waited about 30 minutes and repeated the procedure. Windows open, speakers up, stereo on full blast, lights on. About 15 minutes passed before the police returned. I radioed my wife. Windows closed, speakers down, and lights off. Once again, the police went to my house. They tried every door and spent more time looking in the windows. They even sat in the car out front for about 20 minutes before leaving. About 15 minutes after, they disappeared towards town. We repeated the whole procedure once again, and this time it was less than 5 minutes before the police returned. And this time they had their blue lights on. Oh crap. The police pulled into my empty driveway, but immediately backed out and went to my jerk neighbor's house. They were there for more than 30 minutes. My wife couldn't hear everything that was said, but there was shouting and cursing. Eventually, the police left. My wife radioed me, and I returned home. 2 days later, my neighbor's name appeared in the local newspaper as having been charged with misuse of police resources, filing a false report or something like that. I don't remember the exact charges. Hey, it's been 3 decades ago. But after that night, I never have received another complaint, visit from the city, or police as the result of him, and the other harassment stopped.
Refuse to pay $60 to fix my roof? Okay, I'll close your building site down and cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Posted by Hassad 802. Names, places, and timeframes have been changed per the rules. The characters in this story are my friend, who I'll call Brian, bullying demolition man we'll call Keith, greedy property developer we'll call Karen, and the insurance assessor. The tale of this nuclear revenge happened a while back and is a work in progress. It is too good not to tell, and I'll try to keep you updated down the track. Brian's neighbor is a typical greedy career landlord that left their rental house in disrepair. This poor tenant was living in the cold house, raw sewage leaking onto the lawn, and holes in the house that you could see light coming out of the house. After multiple requests from Brian, Karen refused to get any repairs done. When the state government introduced new laws about ensuring landlords are insulating their rental properties, instead of doing this to the house, Karen kicked their tenant out and left the house vacant for 5 years. 5 years. The old house deteriorated so much more during this time, with rats infesting the house and invading the other houses nearby. Brian and his wife, with their limited funds, were able to get sufficient lending from the bank and offered to buy the house and do it up themselves to improve the neighborhood or rent it out, as there is a massive shortage of rental properties in our local county. Greedy Karen did not want to sell, nor did she want to spend a cent on the house to remedy the rodent problem. She also didn't care about the effect that the house was having on the aesthetics of the street. It's important to know that Karen and her wealthy family have over 100 rental properties, and due to lax tax laws in this region, they do not pay a cent and can get tax write-offs when their properties deteriorate. Then they can claim this as a loss. Long story short, some of them appear to be leeches on our society and are one of the reasons property prices are so high and rent prices are skyrocketing in our area. Her husband is also the chairman of the state's Landlords Association, an association that he often fronts the media for, defending landlords and putting a good media spin on them when there's negative press. Fast forward 5 years, and Brian finds out his house is going to be demolished to make way for some new houses to go in on the small section. That's good news at least, though Brian and his wife were anxious about how smoothly the demolition would go due to the fact that the houses are quite close to each other. This is important for later. Prior to demolition, the company doing it had to get samples from all sides of the house to check for asbestos. Either Karen made it difficult for the company to get down the side bordering Brian's house, or they were simply too lazy, but only samples from 3 sides and not 4 were taken. Demolition day came around, and Brian was concerned that no safety barriers had been put up to protect his house from falling bricks of the chimney, nor was there anything from stopping dust and debris going all over his new deck and porch area. Later that day, Brian had the pleasure of meeting Keith. Keith is a demolition company manager that's well known around the district for only caring about money, and he's got little regard for people or property. Keith was doing the demolition himself today simply with a digger. Brian returned home during his break at work to check the progress of the demolition and found the demolition was already complete after only an hour or so. The demolished house was in a pile. He climbed up on his roof and, to his disbelief, found hundreds of bricks had fallen onto his roof, causing damage. Though he was lucky, none had fallen into the house. Brian phoned up the demolition man Keith to ask about what went wrong. Keith initially played down the damage, despite there being 200 bricks laying on Brian's roof. Even with the damage done, no apology, and the rude attitude of Keith, Brian kept his cool. Since I did a little bit of roofing when I was younger, I can fix up the roof if you just get me 4 new sheets of roofing iron and we'll call it even. Don't worry about paying for paint. I can sort that out when I paint the whole roof after the fall. Brian's roof was not in the best of shape, but it was in much worse shape after having bricks dumped on it, leaving massive dents and chipping the paint. This is the moment that a simple decision on Keith's part would screw him and the landlord big time. Not happening, pal. Your roof is effed anyway. I'll give you a sheet of second-hand roofing iron from my yard to repair the damage on the roof, and I can come and hose off the dust off your deck and your dog kennel. Cue the nuclear revenge. The revenge was not intentionally nuclear, but Brian had a dilemma that his roof was damaged and he needed it repaired. There was rain and snow forecast later in the week, and he shouldn't be out of pocket having to buy new materials to fix his own roof up to a good standard. Brian's normally calm and relaxed, and man, in this situation, the way he and the property were treated, it sparked an anger that I have never seen before. Brian got in contact with his insurance company, and due to the issue involving a roof, a building assessor arrived that day to assess the claim. The assessor would then be able to seek damages from the landlord or the demolition company if he found them to be at fault. Brian also reported the demolition company to the local health and safety authorities due to their lack of safety precautions used when doing the demolition. The assessor got on the roof with Brian and was mortified to hear how Keith had acted in such disregard with the damage done to the roof, and his lack of an apology for any wrongdoing it got the assessor mad. He then looked more concerned and bent down and picked up some gray fibrous material. Luckily, thanks to the pandemic, we already have masks on Brian. This here looks like it's asbestos. I don't know how they got the sign off to get this house knocked down in this manner. You don't know at the time of being exposed to this stuff, but if you breathe in these fibers, it can cause serious diseases later on in life, including lung cancer. I'll get this sent off to the lab for testing, and we will be in touch. Fast forward another day, and Brian was contacted by his insurance company. It turns out the side of the house that wasn't tested was clad in asbestos. Not just any bad asbestos, the worst type that you can get. Insurance will be seeking damages to replace Brian's whole roof, not just the damaged part. The cost of replacement is likely to be around $20,000 USD. This is the cheap part. The demolition site has been shut down by local authorities, and there needs to be a massive decontamination of the area. This involves having to remove at least half a meter of topsoil on the surrounding properties, test the soil, and remove more if their asbestos is still found. Areas with decks need to have potentially these removed so that soil can be evacuated out underneath. The cost for this cleanup will likely be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But who will pay for this is unknown at this stage. Whether it's Keith or Karen's insurance or them personally, time will tell. In regards to Brian, his family, and his dog potentially being exposed to the asbestos, that's another battle for them to fight, and I'll keep you updated. Ooh, this is going to get spicy with these updates coming up. Hello, everybody. Let's dive into the updates. Let me know what you're thinking, and we'll be reading the chat along the way. Hello. Update 1. I have just been on the phone to Brian for half an hour. His workplace was very sympathetic, and they paid for him to have 2 days off trying to sort things out. This is in complete contrast to Karen and Keith, who are yet to apologize, and they've made life difficult for Brian and his family. Due to the neighboring property being closed off for entry due to the health and the safety investigation going on, it means Brian can't even get scaffolding on his roof yet to fix the roof. Brian's worried now that the landlord's going to try to make his life heck. She's also a lawyer, apparently. Karen was the person that offered the old roofing iron, apparently, and it's not Keith. She spoke to her husband, who said that because the bricks dented the roof, it means that it must have been rusty and old, so it doesn't need new iron put on. Keith did, however, go nuts at Brian for getting insurance involved, and also the Health and Safety Investigation Unit, who's currently doing the investigation. In regards to Brian and his family still living in the house, According to the investigator, the risk is negligible and the problems will arise when the debris are removed from the section. This will require a large tent and so on. However, the wind has been strong the last few days and I feel the risk is still high living next door to uncovered broken asbestos cladding that's not being kept damp. Brian asked the investigation office person by phone about what to do about his dog and if they needed like a vet checkup and so on. They were about a meter away from the fence, which is about a foot from the asbestos when it was broken up. They responded by saying, "Do you think your dog will live more than 20 years? If not, I probably wouldn't worry." Wow. Brian is also thinking that the landlord is probably scheming revenge of her own. Brian paid for a new fence himself a few years back to border Karen's rental, as when he moved in, the old fence was half falling down. She refused to pay half, despite this being law. He reckons because the fence is approximately 10 centimeters too high, she will ask him to cut the height down at his own cost, so it's in perfect position for her new houses that are to be built. Brian's plan is that he will pull the nice, expensive fence down entirely and put 600-meter high chicken wire mesh up, as this all is required by law, and there's nothing she can do about it legally, as he paid for and built the fence. I'll continue to keep you all updated. Also, as I know, the local newspaper editor I've offered to go with Brian to discuss the story with them once the investigation's completed, if Karen tries to make life difficult and also expose Keith for his dirty practices. Keith's company have just been awarded a multi-million-dollar contract for demolition of an old car factory, and this would raise some eyebrows. Update 2. A very small update, but not great news. I feel this story, as many have suggested, will not conclude in a warm and fuzzy feeling of ultimate revenge as things progress. Firstly, Brian informed me a fence has gone up around the exposed parts of the neighboring property. This is only to stop people from public going over to the debris pile and scavenging and so on, and then exposing themselves to the broken asbestos cladding. Brian also needed to take 2 full days off of work when this happened to try and sort out all the situation and reduce stress on his wife, talking with all the parties involved. So he was down 2 days' wages coming up to Christmas, but his kind boss has paid him special leave for taking them off. The insurance company, after further clarification, will be only paying out for 1/4 of the roof and the flashings. Brian will have to find funds to pay for the rest. This section of roof is, however, the most expensive, as it encompasses a large complex parapet gutter, roofing iron, and flashing. The cost? About $8,000 USD. I hope I can provide something more substantial in a later update when there's been more action. Update 3, January 9th, 2021. Wish this update was actually something to update you on, but alas, it's merely to say just due to the Christmas break, nothing's progressed. Brian cannot get his roof fixed until the area beside the house is decontaminated so the scaffolding then can go up. Update 4, March 20th, 2021. Another downer of an update. Brian's being paid $8,000 towards his roof. The landlord and contractor got away with not needing a huge area cleanup and convinced local authorities that the building site would be sufficient for decontamination, as the testers could not find samples over the fences of the surrounding houses. All the topsoil on the old section was removed and replaced. A new house has quickly been built by the landlord's builder. The house looks as cheap as they come. A kit set house and looks out of place. Sort of like a house you could load onto a truck and move if needed in the future. Brian still hasn't had his roof fixed yet, as he needs to save money to afford to pay for the whole roof. Update 5, April 13th, 2021. Wow. Brian tells me the demolition company are taking his insurance company to court on the amount they have to pay for the roof. You are just cattle to me, posted by Time's Ugly Stepchild. This story goes back pretty much 20 years now. To set the scene, I was working for a then cable TV company. The call center I was working at had been filled with guys poached from dial-up support companies countrywide to support this new super fast broadband that was being trialed in country for the first time. 500,000 connections. Woohoo! I say this because that meant our call center at the time was full of some of the best support engineers anywhere in the country. Some of the most intelligent people I have ever known. Anyway, about after a year there, 4 of us were asked to look into the complaint sent to the managing director, hereafter known as Big Boss, about the service. Mostly, these were the original brand Karens of the day, but occasionally the customer complaining was someone rather important and they needed the special touch, so to speak. Turns out, the four of us have quite different skills, but complemented each other perfectly, and before long, we were firm friends with the big boss's personal assistant at head office, and had very good reputations to boot after some devilishly difficult issues. Oh yeah, this is before Google, so being good meant you knew your crap, not just how to look it up. It was a great place to work. Turnover was practically zero. The fact that all of our staff were experienced before getting to us meant we knew what we were getting into. Then came the new director, hereafter referred to as A-Hole. A-Hole had come from another call center in the company, the customer services call center. He was also completely inept technically. Seriously, this guy once told me that directors don't use Excel and only Word, so I needed to copy all the spreadsheets into Word so he could modify the content and pass off his bullcrap figures showing all was well. He didn't understand how Excel worked, as it transpired. Anyway, all was not well. In the short time he'd been there, he had alienated most of the best staff. He tried to turn the staff into script monkeys as he wanted every case fixed in X minutes. We were rebuilding TCP IP stacks, hacking registries, heck, we even talked a few people through Win98 rebuilds. You ever tried talking your gran through changing a ringtone over the phone? Now try imagining getting gran to rebuild Windows after Macacrap and Spyman Tech competed to see which could screw up her machine faster. Now, try doing it in 10 minutes or getting hauled into A-Hole's office to be screamed at for effing up his figures. Morale was utterly obliterated, and we started losing good people. Head office knew something was wrong, so sent down the word through the line that the big boss was coming for a meet and greet. That line went through A-Hole, so of course, on that day, some of the more vocal amongst us were voted off. Those selected to meet the big boss were, I think the nice word is sycophants, or people who were instructed what to say and followed out of fear. Upshot, Big Boss went away thinking all was well, and there must be some other reason for the issues on site. My break point came when my team was given an impossible task. By this point, I had already handed in my 30 days. I was about to become a dad, so I needed to get a proper career going. He wanted a flow diagram of every possible fault we were dealing with and its solution. And he wanted it all on a single piece of A3 paper. We objected, he demanded. We failed. We got reamed. Our manager got reamed, and let me tell you, she defended the heck out of us. We tried in vain to explain the nature of the calls, to explain that the reason we paid these very clever people to do this job was because they were essentially playing tech support to a nation of people who had turned a computer on for the first time ever today, did something they didn't know was stupid, and broke their machine. That means their internet didn't work, hence, our problem. His response, at a volume comparable with a tornado jet taking off at a full burner. I don't give an F. Let me get this through your stupid effing heads. You're nothing and I am a director, and when I tell you to do something, you do it or I will fire every single one of you. I can replace any of you anytime I want because you're nothing but cattle. Now get the F out of my office. I went home livid. My girlfriend at the time, pregnant with our first, worked in the same office, so while I was getting out, she would have had to continue to deal with A-Hole. Knowing how he intended to treat my friends and family, I needed to do something. I didn't have a clue what I could do. Friday, I go into work, ostensibly to say my goodbyes and to do the exit interview, the paperwork, and such. One of those goodbyes was a phone call to Big Boss's PA. Me saying goodbye was a shock, because I'd been expressly forbidden to tell them over the previous month by, you guessed it, A-Hole. She wanted to know why I was leaving. I told her. She asked me if I minded her telling Big Boss what I had said. I'll be honest, I didn't seriously believe anything would come of it, but what the heck, I thought. Sure, I'll get back to you soon. And she's gone. 20 minutes later, she calls me and says Big Boss wants to talk to me so he can have my personal mobile number. I give it, and sure enough, minutes later the big man himself calls. The next 30 minutes is spent detailing why I was leaving, why we had lost nearly 100 people already and had 18 resignations that week alone. Why didn't I hear about this when I was there the other week? So, I related the little personnel shuffle and the threats. This was my moment, and I tell you, I carped the heck out of that DM. I said, look, Big Boss, I get all you have is my word, and I could be just some disgruntled jerk, but my friends and family are going to have to work here after I've gone. And by family, I mean my pregnant girlfriend, so I have to do something. If you want to find out the truth, here is what you do. Number 1, turn up on site unannounced for a day. Number 2, Send out your own email to the site as soon as you arrive, giving no time for a-hole and his cronies to get to anyone. Tell them to come to you if they have any concerns. Number 3. Here is a list of people that should corroborate much of what I've said. The rest, it's up to them if they want to do something. Then decide if I'm a jerk. After a bit more chatting, the call ended and I went back to say goodbye to everyone. I told a few people, including my manager, what I'd done and told them if Big Boss did turn up, to get in there and tell him what's going on. Then I bid them all farewell, and I said I would see them all at the mass leaving due to them at the end of the month. I'm at my new job the Tuesday after, and I get a text from the girlfriend. Holy crap, Big Boss is here unannounced. More texts from other ex-colleagues saying pretty much the same thing. From what I gathered afterwards, Big Boss did exactly what I suggested, and it played out pretty much as I thought it might. There was a queue, a long one. That night, A-hole was summoned to Big Boss's impromptu office, and after that meeting, he went home. He was never seen again. I did get a call from Big Boss. He can't discuss details, but I'll be very pleased to know I'm not a jerk. Leaving was pretty cool too, I think. On entry, I was told I wouldn't be paying for a single drink that night. From there, my memory goes from fuzzy to total blank. The hangover the next 2 days was brutal, but totally worth it. Update: a few people have asked if we knew any more on A-hole after the fact, so I went looking. I went looking again on things like LinkedIn and such, and after a lot of looking, he had a fairly common name, I bashed in the right combo of name and company and found him. LinkedIn confirmed that he lost his job in 2001 when all this happened. He eventually found a new job in 2002, but it seems he bounced through a few companies with pretty big gaps in his work history. Currently, seeking new opportunities for the last 4 years.
I was elected on my building board after the death of a member. Median age on the board was 80. I was 40 and the building manager was around 30. Beautiful art decorated building full of very old owners. The older crowd wanted nothing to do with funding any repairs and pretty much ruled the board, but each unit that was sold was generally remodeled with younger owners, who mostly did not bother with board meetings, and there was tension. The elevator in my tier from 1938 finally completely broke and it was not easily fixable, giving me the option of walking up 8 flights of stairs or using the service elevator and riding with the garbage trolley and everyone's dogs and laundry. At the next board meeting, I was so sick of hearing fixed income from these people that had used the elevators and everything else for 40 years without ever setting money aside for eventual replacement. And one old lady, who still had a functioning passenger elevator in her tier, kept interrupting to tell us that we should just be happy to use the service elevator and to understand that residents couldn't afford any extra money. The building literally didn't have the funds to address the issue, and a 7-figure special assessment was needed. The next week, the property manager, who was also just over it all, sent out a notice that the other passenger elevator had broken and repairs were not able to be made, and that we would all be using the service elevator. She included the schedule the custodian had for garbage removal and a note that dogs would no longer be allowed on the elevator between 7:30 to 10 a.m. and 4:30 to 7 p.m. It was a mass chaos, with one creepy old service elevator for 90 apartments and people having to ride with the giant garbage can. After maybe a week or two, the service elevator, which had been modernized to not be from the 30s but still dated to 1970, stopped working. This really was an issue, leaving some people effectively stranded in their apartments. Another memo went out letting people know that repairs would take several days and that garbage pickup was suspended, asking residents to carry their own garbage down with them. An emergency board meeting was called, and a few hours before that meeting, the main pressure pump for the water failed, leaving people above the 5th floor with just dribbles of water and the inability to flush the toilets. The entire thing was just a crap show, and as the majority of the building met in the lobby, I was queasy, wondering what the heck was about to be decided. The building manager, to her credit, had her boss and her boss's boss there along with an attorney, letting the building know that the emergency funding had to be approved or they were going to cancel the management contracts and that the board was in violation of our state condo laws. One lady named Evelyn was the board president and lived on the 3rd floor and voiced her opinion that we had to let people with limited means take priority over building needs. I thought she was going to be murdered right there. We managed to halfway fix the elevator, and the experience forced the new owners to get involved with the HOA board and the elections and to attend meetings. Do you agree with this comment? This is an amazing story on so many levels. The lack of understanding about general maintenance, upkeep, and the absolute necessity of a reserve fund by some of your neighbors, and how wrong the last resident's comment is. The building needs are the needs of the residents, water, and the ability to get out. This is how something as extreme as Surfside happens. The idea that critical maintenance is a discretionary expense. It's not. If I lived in an HOA and I found out that they were putting me in danger to be cheap, oh boy, things would go crazy. What would you do? Oh, this Karen shopper makes fun of OP who has no filter and almost gets fired. Here we go. How I told a customer to go F themselves, but they had my back and saved my job. Posted by the Askew one. Guess who nearly got their butt fired? So, the last few days have been tough for reasons not related to work. I'm on edge and my trigger is shorter than the usual. I'm nearing the end of my shift. I'm tired. We're understaffed, my back aches, and there are long lines at the registers. I mean, a kid is having a tantrum, it's chaos. And that's the moment when my manager decides to pull me away from the customer service desk because there's been a spill and Bradley is new and doesn't seem to be able to clean it by himself. Thing is, I'm alone at the customer service desk running returns that won't process for no reason. There are 4 people waiting and they look like they're ticked, and rightfully so. We've been so understaffed lately that customer service has been crap. There's a guy who's in the line, and he has been for at least 10 minutes. That's how good our customer service has become, and he overhears my manager asking me to take care of the spill. He goes, "Hey, what about you don't ask the special needs guy to clean? It's gonna take forever." That's when I hear myself answer, "Hey, how about you go screw yourself?" A few very long seconds of deadly silence. My manager looking at me in horror, and I'm just here with my mouth still open and dying inside. Karen customer says, "Fair enough." I said, "I'm sorry. I don't know what possessed me. I apologize. I'm really sorry." Customer says, No, fair enough. I mean, I shouldn't have called you special needs. It was very inappropriate. I deserved it. That wasn't a thing to say. Actually, well, I apologize. Don't worry about it. We all have a short fuse at times. Actually, that was rather funny." I reply, "Well, sir, I can just say it's not how I do customer service usually. Again, I apologize." Thankfully, his wife or girlfriend, who was waiting nearby, found the situation hilarious too, and that helped defuse everything. The customer went to talk to my manager, who seemed to be under shock, and asked him not to chew my butt out because he had said something inappropriate first, and we all make mistakes. Needless to say, I thanked him profusely. My manager sent me to clean the spill and then called me to the office. I got a write-up, but I'm not being fired. We all write to complain about bad customers, so I thought it was only fair to mention how a good customer saved me from my own screw-up. And now I'm going to work on understanding why being called special needs made me irrationally angry. Loss Prevention wants us to put in service calls, posted by Cole Carmot. I work for a printing company, and as I tell a lot of people, much of my job is literally malicious compliance. People wanting things printed despite how they look, spelling and design errors, and just being plain ugly. This is another story that has come up these past 2 weeks. A while ago, one of the other locations absolutely destroyed one of their printers. Toner everywhere. The finisher unit was a hunk of plastic and metal, and I genuinely don't know what they did to the machine, but it was screwed up beyond all recognition based on the photo, especially since the toner cartridge is not in that finisher unit. An investigation took place, and it was discovered that rather than calling in printer technicians to repair the machines, some of the company employees were repairing them instead. A company-wide message went out essentially telling everyone not to repair or perform maintenance on the machine ourselves. Genuinely, common sense things had to be put on paper because someone did something stupid. We were always supposed to put in service calls to the techs to come and take care of the machines, or we will be brought to HR. 3 months later, last week, 2 guys from loss prevention, who we'll be calling Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, came in to do a regular check-in. Everything was going great until I needed to change the paper in one of the printers. Tweedledum approached me and basically began raking me over the coals, saying that only technicians can open the machines. Of course, I am dumbfounded because all I'm doing is changing the paper, but I just shrug and say, sorry, won't happen again. Well, the next day, I was brought into a meeting with HR over a video call, basically wagging their finger at me. My boss, D, took the fall for me and said that he was the one to tell me to change the paper, so I got off scot-free, and D only got a slap on the wrist, thankfully so, as this would have been my second write-up in 2 months. The first was a stupid but legitimate mistake on my part. However, as a result of this, the whole facility went into malicious compliance mode after that meeting. Need to change out the paper trays? Service call. Paper jam? Better put in a service call. Need to change the toner? That's a service call. Our output of jobs last week was absolutely in the toilet. Machines were down for nearly 90% of the shifts. The techs were having a field day, however, as they got paid per call they took. While our backlog is through the roof, we were able to make our point eventually. I am not sure exactly what had been happening in the background, but today I received a handwritten apology from Tweedledum and Tweedledummer with a $50 Visa gift card saying that they didn't understand what our job required when they reprimanded me and referred me to HR. We are back at full capacity now and have a huge backlog to catch up on. I'm hoping, in addition to this gift card, I can also get in some approved overtime for some extra spending money on an upcoming trip that I have planned. The company that I work for may be dim at times, but at least they often admit when they make a mistake. Update 1. So I learned a bit more about the situation. The loss prevention people that were involved were the ones directly dealing with the loss of the destroyed printer, and there turned out to be a misunderstanding about everything. My other co-workers in the copy center have gotten into the habit of putting excess paper in the opposite side of the paper tray as storage. Now, the tray can hold up to 12 by 18 paper, so when there's 8.5 by 11 in there, they use the extra space for storage. The techs and D have told them not to do that as they can damage the machine. Whenever I see the excess paper, I take it out. That's what loss protection saw and why they reprimanded me in the first place. They assumed, since I was working with the machines, I was the one who put that extra paper in. I learned this when the company assigned Karen was written up and made it rather vocal today. The problem with working with a good company like this is that it takes way too long to get rid of problem employees. Now, this story really drives home the point of how important it is to set the right example for kids and grandkids. You'll see what I mean. Karen and Ken galore in the adventures of shutting down a taco truck, posted by Fear Factory 007. My sister, 14-year-old female, recently just graduated the 8th grade and will be starting life in her dream high school after summer vacation. I am beyond proud of her and was there for every step of stress that she may have, same as my parents. During the final few weeks of school, my sister's teacher and our dad helped set up a full fun beach day in one of the more beautiful beaches in my city that didn't have a whole lot of restaurants, minus Starbucks and vending machines across the ways, so they also arranged for a taco food truck that has been rented for school functions prior. I wasn't able to go since there was no room in the car as my folks were carpooling as well, and I didn't fully feel like going as it wasn't for me. But this was all fine, as I'm getting ready to hopefully move out into my own place in a year or so. So my folks said this was kind of like a practice round of me living by myself. I've been home alone many times before, but this was a lot more fun than waiting a few hours until someone comes home from work. I did some chores, cooked some lunch, made a grocery list and fed the dogs. Then I did the laundry and the usual adult lifestyle. The only difference of this and when I live alone is the dogs would be out. My family was gone from 9 to 10 a.m. to around 3 to 4 p.m. And when they arrived, my dad helped me go to the store where I bought things for dinner and soda, just because I'm a big soda junkie, and I'm not going to lie about that. Upon arriving back and my sister finishing taking a shower from a full day in the beach, I was told of the events that followed. Scene starts: the beach. As I mentioned, the beach they went to is beautiful, mainly because unlike other beach areas, there wasn't any homeless people living in the area thanks to their safety measures, which is basically those spiky benches and a bridge that you can only drive on. You can't even ride bikes on it. This was also because the place the beach was at is kind of snobbish. My dad said that he's never seen a whiter neighborhood in our state ever, which is a kind of shock because of where we live, but also because of what happens later. It makes it a whole lot worse. Enter scene: students and taco truck. My sister's entire class was, as any other class today, mixed race from several different generations of families and culture. My sister's school was very open on not making people feel outcast in anything, teaching my sister Hebrew and letting them learn different religions being the few things that they did to make it all inclusive. In today's world, it isn't really or should be a shock to see a bunch of kids of different races hanging out together on the beach with their parents. The taco truck arrived and quickly started getting business with the parents and the students and teachers, with amazing meals. I actually had the same truck's food during one school event that I visited. It's bomb. And the things were all peaceful and fun in the sun during the summer with high school in the future. Interstage left: the cops. Also interstage left: the Karens. Everyone was apparently having a good time when two policemen walked over to the area and talked to my sister's teacher and our dad and those of the group who helped set this day up. According to the men in blue, there has been some complaint calls from the locals of a food truck selling food without a permit and loud noises. Now, in my city, you can get a permit for selling food, but if you have a tent or a table or a grill. But if it's a food truck, you don't need it unless you're parked in a park or near an area that's busy, like a hospital or a library. And also, a noise complaint on kids at the beach during a weekend when the beach has other people in it too? When questioning the logic, the cops got snippy to the teacher who was really just trying to find the root of the problem and explain what this is. As my dad said, the cop was straight yelling at the poor man, trying to make a good memory for his students. My mom, however, wasn't going to let this slide with a whimper. Oh no, my mother is a petty queen. Interstage right: my mom. Me and my sisters, we love the dramatic and theatrics that came straight from our mom, who got it from her mom. We love true crime and we love petty things with only a small drabble of tiny guilt-tripping petty. So, enter my mom listening to what's going down and hearing the cops demand they remove this taco truck, or else their beach would be like the other beach that has some homeless people in New York City. No offense to New Yorkers, I hear it's nice. And her response was, looking at the kids, seeing only 5% of the students actually got tacos, turned to the officers and asked, "So, do you want to tell these kids they won't be fed?" The cops stammer and try to say that it's not what he meant until he caved and allowed the kids to eat, but the truck will be locked up as soon as the last kid gets his taco. The line formed, the kids got delicious tacos, and then the truck was packed up and left. The mood was, for obvious reasons, sour after that, and everyone ate and they packed up and just left the beach. Scene end. I'm honestly more so annoyed at the hostility my sister's class got over a beach party. There was no way to know if there were rules, and even if there were, someone would have brought it up and not call the cops, or the cops would politely explain. Not to mention my dad and mom mentioned how they were pretty hostile towards some of the parents, but as soon as the white parents stepped in, their tones were less of, "I will cuff you right now." You will not be able to make it through this story without losing faith in humanity, okay? Here it is. It's called You Forgot Your Baby, posted by UBT400. Let the Karens begin. Years ago, I worked at a liquor store. Needless to say, when you work in retail of a controlled substance, you've seen everything. One time I was at the register, I was wrestling with the receipt printer or something behind the counter. I ducked under the counter to fiddle with the cord when I heard the bell of a door. I looked up to say, "Good morning." There was a woman with a baby on her hip, maybe a 7 or 8 month old. I let her know that I was there to help and answer questions if needed and went back to fiddling under the counter. I heard her approach, but then walk away without saying anything. Next thing I know, little hands are grabbing at my hair. I look up and her baby is on the counter. The mother is nowhere nearby. I quickly grabbed the baby and sat them on the counter so it wouldn't crawl anymore or fall off of the counter, and then I looked around. The mother was a few aisles away at that point. I was more than a little stunned and called out, "Ma'am, you forgot your baby." She turned to me and said something to the liking of, "You said that you would help? It's easier to shop while I'm not holding him, duh." I told her there were shopping carts that had baby seats. Please use them. I don't want to be responsible for her child. She rolled her eyes and grabbed 2 bottles of whatever the heck and came back to the counter. She paid, picked up her child, and left. She didn't even tell me she was leaving the kid at the counter, just sat them down and walked away without a word. I know, if that baby fell, she would have blamed or tried to sue me.
HOA election overturned, posted by Ed Yang 73. New owner in a fierce battle with an incumbent HOA board. California, city in Orange County, almost 700 homes, mostly high-end single-family homes to townhouse-style condos, so like $1 to $5 million. There have been ongoing complaints about the bullying tactic of the president for years. He controls the board, who are just yes men, 5 board members. In May 2023, he and another board member were up for election. Due to the fact that we almost never achieve quorum, 25%, we launched a stealth campaign to write in 2 candidates and then gathered ballots and proxies. The result? We had about 170 votes for our 2 candidates, 40 for president and 25 for the other incumbent. I was at the Inspector of Elections a night off when they opened ballots while others were on the Zoom call. They asked quietly if there were any nominations from the floor. They paused and then moved on. We were all confused with what that was. I asked, "Well, what does that mean?" They said that if you didn't nominate any candidate from the floor, any write-in candidates were not valid. Thus, they disqualified all of our ballots and wouldn't even give us a count of how many we had. Naturally, we were furious. My mistake was not having a copy of the election rules handy. It wasn't until later that I read our election rules clearly allowed write-ins. Section 5.4 said that write-in candidates are permitted provided they meet the required candidate qualification, so they must be a record owner, current in assessments, and so on. Owners bombarded the property management company with complaints, so they were forced to set up a redo election coming up on October 11th. Their excuses for why they kept changing, well, they didn't nominate from the floor. They alleged some proxies looked suspicious. They blamed the Inspector of Elections for not sending all owners a proxy as required by our rules, and so on. Fast forward to today. They've done everything possible to confuse this redo election. Ballots mailed out at the very latest window required by law, which is 30 days, with some owners not receiving it. There were proxies mailed out early and separate, which confused owners. Ballots left off half the owners, mostly women. When confronted, the inspector blamed the project management company for sending them an incomplete file, but now they have a complete file. Myself, being the campaign lead and one of the candidates, have been served with violation notices coincidentally. Mine had a due date only 36 hours from when I received it. When I challenged it, they blamed it on a glitch and moved it to 45 days. A board member not up for election sent out 3 separate email blasts attacking me, not by name, viciously, and then attacking and lying about our 2 candidates, which also violates our election rules. They plan to mass email links to electronically signed proxies to all homeowners.
I protested to the project management and the inspector that this is illegal. On the monthly board meeting during open forum, they wouldn't answer questions. Their attorney was on and shut me down, and then they muted me when my 3 minutes was up. So my question is, if they come up with some reason to overturn this redo election, what else can we do? Maybe file a case in small claims court and present all the evidence from the first and upcoming election, ask a judge to declare our candidates as rightful winners, if we win, which we are on track to, and then initiate a recall of all 5 board members, 3 if we win, and kick out the current 2. Do you agree with this comment? Talk to either an HOA lawyer or a lawyer with knowledge of the Davis-Sterling Act. Yeah, if they're pulling illegal things, you have a lawyer that specializes in HOA stuff, then yeah, get them. I reported my former landlord to the IRS for tax fraud as revenge for him making up lies on me to keep my deposit. He had to file for bankruptcy and lost his condo. Posted by Extremely Tired of HR. I'm so glad he lost his frickin' house. I found this guy on Craigslist a few years ago. I like renting condos from private owners as opposed to renting apartments. Typically, by renting a condo, it's safer, you have more caring residents, and you get to have a luxury apartment-style home with all the amenities, and you can negotiate pricing and so on. I am an excellent tenant, and anyone who I have rented from will tell you that. I paid a $1,000 deposit to move into this guy's condo, and I was on a year lease. He lives in another state, but we were on the same time zone. On month 8 of my lease, I came home to a door that wouldn't open. I couldn't get the door unlocked for crap. I had 2 keys on me, and as much as I tried to turn them, I couldn't. One of the keys even broke in the lock. I waited 2 hours. I called and texted and emailed my landlord, and he did not pick up. I thought maybe he had someone to change the locks for some reason. I honestly didn't know what to think and had no one to help me. The lady who lived across from me saw me in distress as she was going into her apartment. I had never seen her, but she asked me if I were okay, and I explained to her that I couldn't get into the apartment. She told me that she knows of an on-call locksmith, and she gives me his number. I tell her thanks and reach out to my landlord a few more times. No response. I had no choice but to call the locksmith, plus I had to pee like crazy. The locksmith arrives and could not get the door unlocked with my key. He says he can replace the lock for like $100, and I told him I was renting a condo and couldn't get in touch with the owner and didn't know when would be the next time I could get in touch with him. After he took the lock off, he told me it was faulty. So, he replaced the lock. I told the landlord this via email and text and voicemail and told him that I could send him copies of the keys if he wanted. Okay, so fast forward to the end of my lease. I demand that he does a walkthrough with me, and he said he wouldn't. I told him that if he didn't do a walkthrough, I would be notifying the condo office, as he did not have permission to sublease by the association. He then had a friend to serve as his proxy to come meet me and walk through the unit. The place was spotless. I mean, I know how to clean. I took multiple photos and videos and showed his proxy, who is a police officer, the unit. Actually, they're both police officers who used to work together. We both literally tested all the appliances, faucets, checked the blinds, carpets, hardwood, everything. His proxy gave me the okay and said that everything looked great. I give his proxy the keys and later that night left for my new city. So fast forward to a month later. I haven't heard from him about my deposit. He ignored all my emails and phone calls. He finally gets back with me 2 months after I moved out and has all this ridiculous made-up crap about how I damaged his unit. Broken blinds, scratches on the hardwood floor. He made it seem like I damaged his door by getting the lock replaced. He even said that there were scratches on the outside of his door, rust here and there, broken dishwasher, sink, and oven, broken dryer, just all these lies. I would never leave a unit in that condition. He sent me an itemized list of all the charges that magically came out to be $1,000, the same as my deposit. He was always planning to keep my money. He wanted that money to either ball on it or upgrade his condo, and I hated him. I decided I wasn't going to go to court because I had moved to a different state and I live alone, but I thought of something. He rented to me under the table and likely didn't claim my rent payments as earned income. I had all my wire transfers on my bank statement. I had his routing and account number and a copy of his driver's license, as we agreed to swap IDs when I signed the lease to make sure that I wasn't getting scammed. I found his out-of-state address online, gathered all my bank statements, gathered his bank account numbers, and made a report with the IRS. About a few years later, I check up on things, and that jerk lost his condo and lost everything he owned in bankruptcy. I paid for and downloaded his court records and saw proof that he lost everything, including his condo and cars, and had his bank accounts seized. I'm not sure if he's went to jail or anything, but I'm so glad that jerk got his freaking karma. He stole money from me that I gave him to rent a condo, and he ends up losing that same condo to bankruptcy. Screw him and anyone who calls him a friend. He can rot for all I care. Now this comment here gives the truth and says, I wouldn't be surprised if your tip-off uncovered something much larger and more systematic. It tends to work out that way. Neighbor gets expensive smart home appliances installed on Wi-Fi with no password. Calls the police when I let them know that's bad. Posted by ULFR. I was farting around with a crappy laptop's Wi-Fi card and I saw that I had an access point that I could connect to that wasn't there before. Signal was so-so and I had my own internet, so I didn't bother trying to use that one, so I just sorta forgot about it. About a week later, I was unplugging some stuff and accidentally unplugged my wireless router, and while it was unplugged, my phone found the next accessible Wi-Fi access point, which was the one I'd found previously and not really bothered with. Not my circus, not my monkeys, you know? Then my phone pops up saying I need to install all of these smart home apps to make the appliances work, which didn't make sense. I'm enough of an IT guy to know that unless there's a burning need for it, home automation isn't really the best idea. Absolutely no telling who can access that information. These people had their garage doors, heating and air conditioning, lights, interior and exterior, televisions and refrigerator hooked up to a Wi-Fi with no password. In the industry, we call that dumb as a bag of hammers. Once I plugged the router back in to appease the suddenly irate family members wondering where the internet went, I hooked up my dog and took him for a walk. Before I left the house, I installed the smart home app and turned on one exterior spotlight and then looked for the house it was attached to. Presumably, if I was able to use their Wi-Fi, they were in line of sight. Once I saw the light that was on, I turned it off to make sure. The house was on the next street over, directly behind my house. There's a huge hill in the way that the builders left because Mother Nature didn't flatten my part of the country as a courtesy, so lots can be next to each other without being easily accessible. That meant going the long way around. My dog is an adorable 35-pound cockapoo who has much, much better people skills than I do. When I have to go to talk to people I don't know, he comes along because, well, he's about as threatening as a wet noodle. Don't tell him I said that. And I can't be that bad of a man if my dog is as awesome as he is. So we make our way over to the neighbor's house and I knock on their door. A nice old lady answers it, old enough to have moved out kids, but not old enough to be considered a Q-tip in my humble opinion. She forgets to ask what I want and immediately goes all gooey over my dog, and her husband hears the adorable appreciation sounds coming from his front door and investigates. He too is floored by my dog's awesomeness. There's about a minute of him getting all the attention, and I thought building a rapport before I remember why I'm here. I ask how they like their new smart home stuff, and they immediately start getting weirded out. Husband says, "We like it just fine. How do you know we got all that stuff?" Please don't take this the wrong way, I say, but you don't have a password on your wireless. My phone connected to it by accident and told me about all the stuff you had installed. Wife cocks her head to one side and husband's brow starts developing a thunderous quality. I start talking faster. I'm just here to let you know that you really should put a password on your Wi-Fi, or anyone can use it to do stuff like open your garage doors. Husband's brow is now in full fury mode, and he opens his mouth to, presumably, shout at me. But before he can, the wife says, "Oh, that's what the installer guy was talking about. He kept saying I needed to encrypt the thingy or something like that. We've never bothered with the password because it's a pain in the butt to set up and remember." Husband has gone from thunderous fury to bewilderment, and he looks at his wife and says, "Encrypt the what now?" I don't feel like getting voluntold to set up these people's network and appliances for them, so I say, "Okay, gotta go, bye." I power walk away from their house, and once clear, we mosey back towards my house. About 2 hours later, someone starts knocking at the front door to my house. Now, I live in an in-law apartment in the basement of my parents' house, so that's not my door. My mother answers the door and then stomps down to the door to my part of the house, throws it open, and tells me the police are here, again in a frosty voice. I hustle up the stairs, and there's Officer Dave, it's not his real name, but the only officer in my town at that point who had knew enough about the computers to actually have a conversation with me without getting a must-smash nerd face. I say, "Hi Dave, what's..." He cuts me off before I can even finish. "You promised me you were done with this crap after that whole Main Street thing. You freaking promised, and now I look like a butthole." Whoever had set up the timing on the stoplights from the main road through my town after some pretty serious construction did an absolutely awful job, and traffic was horrific. Me and a locksmith friend decided to fix the problem after reporting the problem to town hall got nowhere. We didn't break anything. I mean, he picked the lock and I hacked the light, and then we locked up when we were done. We got caught on the last light. The only reason I didn't go to jail was because Dave backed me up and made everyone wait a day to see if traffic was better, which it was. I then promised him no more shenanigans. What? I haven't done anything," says I. "Then why the heck am I getting calls about you opening and closing people's garage doors and turning their lights on and off?" To be fair, that did sound like the sort of thing that I do. Not to break into someone's house, just to mess with them. I'm mischievous, not evil. And then the light dawns. I point and I ask, "Did you get called by the people living in that house? Because I went over there a little while ago to tell them that they needed to put a password on their Wi-Fi. The only thing I did was turn on a spotlight to see which house it was. Nothing more than that, swear to God." "They don't have a password." There's a thud as Dave face palms. I let out a yup in sympathy. He sighs and says, "Stay out of trouble," and I wave bye. Turns out the husband had called the police and gave a vague description of me and the dog and said that I lived nearby, and one of the other cops gave Dave a hard time about him cutting me slack before he drove out to talk to me. The couple got a call back to tell them that the issue was resolved and please secure your Wi-Fi. 2 days later, there's a password on their Wi-Fi, and we all lived happily ever after, except for getting the stank eye from that couple whenever I walk by. Karen story time. This one's called "Give Me Your Game," posted by Billy RKO 1987. I live in an apartment with my wife for 5 years. This situation happened recently. I was sitting at our kitchen table eating dinner and playing Pokemon Pinball. I was using my Game Boy Color. I had our kitchen window open and the blinds moved so I could get a good breeze from outside, and I figured, what could go wrong? Well, enter Karen and her son. Never even seen her before. I'm playing my game and I hear something behind me. I assumed the family of birds that live in the tree right outside were the family of bunnies. Wrong. A boy asked me what I'm doing. My back is to him, and I explained that I'm eating dinner. Stupid me decided to say I'm also playing a game. I told him the game and the handheld that it's for. He said, okay, went to his mom who was a few feet away. I went back to what I'm doing. Well, the boy came to my window again and asked if he could play it. I explained that I don't know him. I won't just give my stuff to just anyone, and maybe his mom could get him one. There's a disc replay store nearby and half-price books. Both probably have it. He said, oh, okay, and went back to his mom. Well, the mom, I guess, didn't like hearing the word no. Now she is at my window, not asking, demanding I give my video games to her as a peace offering. Peace offering for what? I again said no. I'm not going to give my stuff to anyone. I have no idea if I would even get it back. She didn't like it, got mad, stomping her feet a few times. I closed my window, closed the blinds, and went back to what I'm doing. Fine? No, far from it. A few minutes later, I see the famous flashing lights. When I see 3 police cars stop at the apartment building I live in, I checked outside. Karen was talking to an officer before he managed to get out of his police car, and she was pointing to my apartment. I knew immediately what I'm getting. 2 officers go into the mailroom and press my doorbell. I open the door and let them in my apartment. I explained that I'm eating dinner and playing a game. Her son asked about my game, asked to play, but I said no. I did explain about 2 nearby stores where he could get it if the stores have the handheld and the game of it. I'm asked if I ever punched her son and took it from him. I said, no, I never touched him. I never stole from him. It's my game and my stuff. I hear Karen yelling outside to the officers on the sidewalk that I should be arrested for assault to a minor, and jailed. I explained again that I never touched him, never touched her, and showed both officers where I was sitting and where they were outside my kitchen window. My neighbor in the next building called out to the officers that he had heard everything and has the interaction on camera. His landlord installed a few cameras, and due to package thieves in the area, and wanted to help him catch them by putting up a few cameras. Lucky for me, his landlord was there and showed police the footage. Karen went white and started yelling that we are horrible people, that we lied. She's gonna sue. She got a nice talking to about misuse of 911. Her son was nice. I saw him with his father a few times. The boy says hi to me, and the dad apologized to me about his ex-wife. I guess the son filled him in. Apparently, this wasn't the first time that she did this, which is why he divorced her. He has full custody now because she assaulted a boy in a mall and tried to take his Nintendo Switch. She's in jail. The boy did get a Game Boy Color from his father. 5 police cars showed up tonight at my neighbor's house, posted by Belgian Els. So my cat didn't come home for dinner. Very strange. He's usually the one, we have 2, demanding I get to opening the tins. So I look in the usual spots. Is he stuck in a closet or the garage? Nothing. I eat dinner, thinking he'll be around meowing at any minute. Well, no sign of Frank, the cat. He's mostly an indoor lazy guy who wanders a bit around outside. Anyway, my neighbor previously, a month ago or so, had yelled at my wife about the cat crapping in his garden. Okay, that's not cool. He has a litter box, and we have a garden. I get that that's a bit annoying. So anyway, I go over to his place and knock on his door. Said that I understand my cat has been bothering you. I gave him my business card and said if he ever bugs you again, please call or text me and I'll deal with whatever mess or whatever. Meanwhile, I'll try to improve the situation. I bought some dirt, catnip, and made an outdoorsy litter area for my guy. Showed it to him a few times. We made an effort to keep him inside more. But I'll be honest, 8 years as an indoor-outdoor, he gets antsy and crafty about getting outside. Anywho, I'm wandering around the roads near my place, hoping not to find a tire print over my cat. No sign. He doesn't come home, so now it's worry time. I kinda know in the back of my mind that the neighbor did something. So I'm wandering around outside and I approach his driveway, calling for Frank, and I hear him. He's meowing for me. Okay, so I follow the sounds and, yep, he's trapped in Buddy's garage. So I tried the door, figured he could have wandered in and got stuck. Ah, crap, he's got stuck on mine before. The door's locked, dang it. Knocked on Buddy's door, said, hey, I hear my cat stuck in your garage. He says, verbatim, yep, bye, and goes to close the door. I knock again, but louder. Now this guy is a boomer, probably 65 years old, and he says, what? And I said, man, you got my cat in there, just let him out, thanks. And he says, no. At this point, I'm at the front door, and he's closing it as I put my foot in there, and I'm like, buddy, freaking let him out. He says no again, and I said, should I break this window to get him out? He pulls out his phone and starts recording and says, "You're threatening me." And I'm like, "Bro, you stole my cat. Let him freaking out." And he says no again. Goes to close the door, and I knocked it hard as it closed and popped open. Guess it didn't latch. And he tells his wife, sorry to say, but I think he has done things to his wife, to call 911. And she does. And he slams the door with his shoulder and locks it. I hear them literally on emergency calling the police. I'm like, okay, he stole my cat. He can't keep him. That's not a thing. So I dialed the non-emergency line and told my end. Neighbor threatened my cat before, now he has him captive. And she tells me the squad car will be there soon to talk to him. And like 5 seconds later, the first car pulls up. I give him my ID, tell him my cat is in there. He says, "Well, how do I know?" I said, "I can hear him." "Well, does he have a cat?" "No, I'm pretty sure he hates cats." I show him a picture and say, "He's in the garage here." 2 more cars pull up, 4 more cops. I'm like, wow, this is really something. First cop talking to Buddy, watching the video. But then 2 more. 5 total. One guy is like SWAT gear ready to kill somebody. They talk to him. Cat is meowing like crazy beside us in the garage. The SWAT guy's like, "Did you steal his cat?" The other cop says, "He says he did. Says that this guy's, mine, cat is in there. He craps on my property, right there." He points to a little dirt patch behind a bush. I'm like, "I'm sorry, man. I didn't tell my cat to come over here and find a good litter box. I'm working on it." SWAT guy is like, "We drove 130 kilometers per hour or 90 miles per hour up here because cat dung?" Neighbor says he was threatening me. And at that point, I said I just asked how I should go about getting my cat out of the garage. SWAT guy tells Buddy that he's called a break and enter to 911 because I was sneaking around his garage. And the first cop is like, "This guy stole his freaking cat." SWAT guy says, "Why'd you call a break and enter?" Neighbor says I didn't. And he's like, "Should we go down to the shop and pull the tape?" Neighbor starts pulling a "don't you know who I am? Don't talk down to me" crap. Those are quotes. And the guy is saying it's a crime to call emergency for a non-emergency. Like down to the station kind of crime. First cop is like, "Let the cat out now." And he finally does. Frank runs out and home. The cop says this is stupidly unreasonable that you called 911 over cat dung. Guy finally apologizes, shakes my hand and says sorry to me. I said, "Do you still have my number? I'll literally come fix whatever he messes up while I try to get him trained to stop using your garden and the dirt patch." The cop says to me to do what I can to keep the cat indoors. I mean, I'm saying I do try, but my niece and 5-year-old live with us and sometimes he's crafty. Anyway, now I am not sure what is going to happen if my cat gets out again. What a crap show. I'm wired and can't sleep though, so I thought I'd share. Half-brothers threatened to sue me over $16,000. It cost them $158 grand and possibly their parents' marriage, posted by Deleted. When I, 25-year-old female, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name, and the account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At that point, it contained just over $300,000. My grandparents left me a letter saying that they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, meaning my full siblings, Dad's a Smith and Mom's a Jones. By fairly, they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are dad and stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing to do would be to assign each of us $100 grand, so we each all got an equal-sized lump sum. And I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his $100K, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested that I buy a house with my $100K. I found a place that I loved, but it was $130,000 and I couldn't get a mortgage, so Dad said, well, I should borrow $30K from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at $208,000 right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at $195K, so I still owe $13,000. Joe turned 21 recently, and as I was giving him his $100,000, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained, and I said that I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac, and both boys said that I stole from them and owed them the full $13,000 back, plus $3,000 of interest that they felt they would have gotten, and they wanted it all paid by this summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring up the account to $211,000. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said that I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day, I got an email clearly written by them saying that they intend to sue me for the $16,000 plus whatever is currently in the account and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about $50,000 of his $100,000 because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount that I deem fair, so that $50,000 was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts and calls and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal, and I blocked them. They then took to social media, saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this, and it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said that he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, our grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with $150,000 in it and a scan of a letter from our grandparents saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among Dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me that we have another half-sibling who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with the solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris's illegitimate kid fund. And as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones Kids Fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the $50,000 because it's all they're getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a private message from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris's fund. Chris also said no and told Dad that we had met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and the other half-sibling with Chris's permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids that Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure that no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap, but I'm holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, Stepmom apparently didn't know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home because it looks like she is not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider, but honestly, I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. Rental permit drama, HOA in violation of the CC&Rs, posted by LaCoy. Back in 2020, I applied for a rental permit in my small community and was placed on the waiting list. I would periodically check my status, and I was consistently told that I was first on the list. Per our CC&Rs, there are only 4 rental permits available. Fast forward to 5 months ago, I found out that 3 of 4 permits were granted to a single person. As soon as I found out, I brought this to the board and explained how unfair it was for one person to have 3 of 4 permits in a very small community with less than 40 homes. They essentially told me that there was nothing they could do, since the prior board approved it and I would have to wait until a permit became available. Recently, one of the tenants moved out of the rental owned by the person with 3 of the permits. I then checked Zillow and I found out that the landlord had had the home listed for lease. Per our rules, the rental permit provides a 60-day right to lease. If you're unable to rent your home in that time, then it's passed to the person on the waiting list. If there is no one on the waiting list, then the HOA will grant you another 60-day right to lease. Additionally, the home has been empty for the last month. Per our rules, as soon as a number of rentals drops below 4, the person on the waiting list has the right to the permit. I reached out to the board to let them know that the unit had been listed for lease for more than 60 days, and that due to only 3 homes currently being leased, I was entitled to the permit. After almost 2 weeks, including me sending a follow-up email, the president said he investigated and determined that the current permit holder had a right to the permit. He basically ignored all the facts presented, including listing screenshots and me referencing the CCRs verbatim, and flat out said they would not grant me the permit. At this point, the HOA is blatantly violating their own rules, even when provided with evidence of the violation. Any thoughts on what to do next? Do you agree with this comment? You could see what other things are not being done around the community. Put that together and go to your neighbors. Get them to recall the current president. Then it gives you the chance to run or talk to the new president about getting the option to rent out your home. The other options are to see or consult an attorney, since the board is ignoring governing documents. Man, if OP could take over or get a lawyer that knows this stuff, what do you think would happen? Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.